To have our next guest back on the show with us. It's been a little bit since he's been busy in Washington, D.C. Even while we're enjoying the summer vacation, he's out there banging his head against the wall with some of these shenanigans going on out there, and we always appreciate it. From the big 1st District out in the western portion of the great state of Kansas, happy to have on here from District Number 1, it's Congressman Tracy Mann. Congressman, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, Andy. Thanks for having me on this morning. We're in D.C. today, fighting the fight. I feel like you got to put on your helmet and shoulder pads every day in this town, and that's what we're doing, my friend.
Well, I applaud you guys for doing it every day, because I'm sure it gets frustrating at times with how narrow of a margin you guys have in the House and how frustrating some of those conversations may be, especially with some of the topics right now. I mean, it seems like it's the same topics that go on, and we can't progress a whole lot further with some of this stuff because it seems like with such a narrow margin that we're almost fighting amongst ourselves, aren't we?
Andy, that's some of it. I mean, hey, elections have consequences, and the facts are we have 435 members of Congress, and 2 weeks ago we had a 1-vote difference between Republicans and Democrats. Now that's grown to 3 as a few special elections happen. That said, whether we, regardless of the size of the majority, we've got to make sure that we are every win we possibly can. We got to make sure that we're using our influence and our leverage, everything we possibly can do to save our great country. Because as we all know, things aren't going very well right now.
Yeah, amen to that. Let's talk about some of those issues. I want to start off with the appropriations bills, because I know that's usually the time where you guys are having these conversations. There was a headline just a day or so ago that as you guys are working on one of the appropriations, including the State Department, Homeland Security, Department of Defense, for, national security issues, kind of an important thing, but trying to make things more efficient, the White House made a statement saying that if you guys pass the appropriations bill that's currently being discussed, that they would veto the bill because there's too many cuts and slashes and consolidations and so on and so forth in this bill, which is typical Democrats. We need to spend more money. But what's the conversation been looking like for you guys on this issue?
Well, my first thought when I saw the headline is I can't wait for President Trump to be back in the White House, right? That was my first thought. Number two, here's the deal, Andy. We're $34 trillion in debt. Yeah. That's 34,000 billions. And when you have the White House come out and say, even before we considered bills, that the base text, if we make any cuts, we're going to veto it. I'm thinking to myself, how true is it that you want to see the demise of our nation? We've got to get our fiscal house in order. We've got to get a high return on investment for our taxpayer dollars. We got to wake up to the reality that we're $34 trillion in debt, Andy, which means the number one line item in the federal budget this year is interest on the debt, which exceeds $1 trillion.
Wow.
So that's where we are, and I feel like the White House needs to wake up to that reality.
Yeah, if we're paying $1 trillion on interest alone, I look at that and kind of relate it to a personal budget. If I'm paying more interest than I am on a principal at all and I'm not getting anywhere, then what's the point of even doing it? Like, there's no way that we can sustain a level like that. Then you look at the entire budget, and obviously you know this, the difference between our mandatory spending and our discretionary spending, where right now even the mandatory spending supersedes what you guys are even discussing in the 12 different appropriations. It's all the social programs, and we're squabbling over how much we need to actually fund for our military and for our defense of the nation. Like, that's kind of a crazy conversation to me.
That's right, and then in that conversation, the White House saying any cuts, they'll veto them, right? So that's just, you laid out perfectly the perspective that we've got to approach this with. But hey, look, we're $34 trillion in debt. We will spend more money on interest on the debt, Andy, than we'll spend on national defense. Wow. Just think about that. And we're kidding ourselves if we think there's not ramifications for this. It's one of the reasons we have inflation, that and the administration's crazy war on fossil fuels. But also, our national security and America as we know it, if we don't rein in our debt, it truly is an existential threat to the nation, in my view.
Yeah, it is going to be concerning. Now, we haven't passed the actual appropriations bills and passed the federal budget on time when we actually end our federal budget, which is the end of September going into October. The way that the progression is going right now, and with the politics during an election season, do you think that we're going to actually pass all these appropriations on time, or will we be doing another continuing resolution till the end of the year, which might actually be a good thing this year with the transition potentially of the leadership in the presidency? But what kind of timeline are we looking at to actually get all these finalized and done, do you think?
Yeah, so there's 12 appropriations bills. 3 of them are up this week. A lot of amendments, a lot of good amendments that make some appropriate cuts and then September 30th is quickly approaching. I'm not a fan of CRs or continuing resolutions.
Yeah.
Have not voted for any of them last year or this term, and it's because instead of kicking the can down the field, Congress needs to do its job and we need to have an adult conversation in this country, Andy, about our spending.
Yeah.
And CRs kicking the can down the road, taking the pressure off is not the way to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've done that way too many times. I know that on the Senate side, Senator James Lankford from from Oklahoma had pushed the Government Shutdown Prevention Act, trying to stop it, even if we don't pass a budget on the right time, that they can't use the scare of actually shutting down the government. We just kind of maintain and keep going. Is that something that we need to continue to look at and discuss, so that way when this deadline comes down, that we don't just panic and then end up caving to Democrats like we seem to do all the time with government spending?
Yeah, I've not seen that legislation. I would say that in this town, there's got to be pressures and deadlines to get people to move and for things to occur. So, but it should never come to that, Andy. I mean, we should I'd like to see a conservative Congress that's put forward a budget that balances and that begins to get our fiscal house in order. That's what we ought to do.
Yeah.
Which is why November matters a great deal coming up here.
Yeah, amen to that. I'm optimistic about that. I hope that we can see a bigger margin of Republican majority in the House and take back that Senate to actually get something done. Speaking of, let's talk about immigration for just a moment as well. I know that's been big on the campaign trail right now for candidates around the country, and obviously the presidential candidates as well. The Biden administration is now taking the stance of they're going to be tough on immigration. They're going to be tough on the border, and he's passed now 2 executive actions over the past month to say that he's cracking down on immigration in some fashion. It hasn't really worked, and I don't think the American people are buying it, but he says that he has to do it because Congress has not acted on the issue. While you guys in the House have already passed H.R. 2, Democrats don't want to look at it, but I mean, what are we waiting on here? Why can't we ram this thing through? Because H.R. 2 would be the most commonsensical bill I think that we could have right now.
Yeah, so to be clear, what the White House is doing is they are with these executive orders, they are creating the illusion that they're trying to do something to solve the border crisis that they caused, but in reality, it doesn't do anything at all. The president knows he has a political problem, and that is everyone in the country sees this wide open southern border, doesn't like it as they shouldn't, and so he's got to pretend like he's doing something about it. But make no mistake, Andy, the president caused this crisis. I mean, last month was the 39th straight month where illegal encounters have been higher than even the highest month under President Trump.
Wow.
So you just look at what this is. We are now at 12 million encounters at the border, 1.8 million gotaways. I mean, so just yesterday, they released that 400 illegal immigrants from Central Asia have come into the country that have a ties to ISIS. 400. Now, Border Patrol or ICE has caught some of those people who have more than 50 that remain unknown. I mean, this is the national security threat of our lifetime. It's President Biden's cause, and he's not willing to do anything about it.
Well, and that just brings up the concern is if that's what we know that's come across the border or that we've caught or that we're unsure of, how many others have come across that we don't even know about that may be tied to some terrorist organization from either the Middle East or from China that has bad intentions as well, or from other parts of the world that we don't even know because they've been able to slip through without us even being aware of it. So it's a major national security threat, and yet we're not doing anything to address the issue. Yeah,
that's spot on. And, so there's 2 categories. There's folks that come across that have an interaction with the Border Patrol. There's others that are called gotaways that the Border Patrol sees from afar, suspects. We have no idea who they are, where they're from, what their intentions are, and that is 1.8 million.
Yeah.
Just to get you a sense of the quantity. The House last year, House Resolutions 2, the Border Security Act, the most comprehensive bill in generations to secure the border. And any of your listeners, if you just Google the H.R. 2 Border Security Act, it outlines exactly what we ought to do. Fortunately, the Senate's not been willing to move on it. Biden said he's going to veto it, which is not a big surprise. But H.R. 2 is what we ought to do. Frankly, anything less of that is not really doing all we can do to solve our border crisis.
No, it's really not. And the big question is, Congressman, is can we come back from the amount that's actually come in illegally? Because right now we're seeing the homeless crisis right now. We're seeing the crime rates rise all over the nation. We're seeing numerous cities, including New York, including Chicago, over in California, where they're spending massive amounts of government and taxpayer money in order to take care of these migrants because they have no place to go, from hotels and from apartment complexes. I mean, LA is spending $600,000 a year on a single unit of an apartment complex for these migrants, and we seem to be totally okay with it.
Yeah, that's right. Meanwhile, we have $34 trillion deficit. And don't forget, we've had 30 tons of fentanyl, 30 tons smuggled across the border. We have more fentanyl in this country, enough to kill every American 3 or 4 times over.
Yeah.
This is a cataclysmic failure of leadership from the White House. But the facts are he just is not willing to do anything about it, which means November and then January 20th, in my mind, can't get here soon enough.
Yeah, amen to that. We got just a couple minutes left with this. It's Congressman Tracy Mann from the big 1st District here in the great state of Kansas. Let's talk about the Farm Bill. I know you guys have been progressing on this one for 2024. It was the delay after the Farm Bill that got extended from last year. Where are we with the Farm Bill right now, and do you think it's actually going to pass here soon?
Yeah, I've been frustrated with how slow the process has been. The House passed out, on my House Ag Committee, we passed out a pretty good version about a month ago, our version of the Farm Bill. It's a good bill, Andy. And it's a fiscally conservative Farm Bill that makes sure that taxpayers are getting a return on the dollars that are being spent in the bill. It works for our ag producers, works for rural America, and it is a really good bill. The Senate has been lagging our efforts. We will see what they do on their side, but September 30th is going to be pretty quick, and I am chomping at the bit to get this done, to lock in certainty for our ag producers, to get a fiscally conservative and move on down the road.
That is good news. That is good news. Now, how we've been able to at least contain a little bit of the SNAP program that was involved in the Farm Bill that was essentially taking over it for a while, near 80-90% of the Farm Bill spending. Does it focus a little bit more so on the actual agricultural industry over the SNAP program, do you think?
Well, so the food nutrition programs are mandatory spending. And so the Farm Bill, although it governs that, oversees it, the actual spending in that is somewhat locked in. That said, we need to make sure that we are providing oversight. A lot of these programs are administered at the state level. The House-passed version provided some teeth to make sure we have some oversight of these states that are implementing the program. And we just want to make sure there's no waste, fraud, and abuse in these programs.
Perfect. I love it. It's Congressman Tracy Mann from the big 1st District right here in the state of Kansas. A lot of things going on during the summertime that's leading up to what we could see as a transition in D.C. by the end of the year. Congressman, thank you so much for your time, my friend. I always love chatting with you. Keep up this fight. Let's get you back on again real soon.
It sounds good, Andy. Thanks for what you're doing. Hey, we got to keep praying for the country, and we can't stop believing in the future of our great republic. So thanks for having me. Have a great day.